Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast with the boys. It is me, Hunter, and my co-host Brett, and today we are talking about the uprising and political protest in Belarus. Brett, give us your take on it.
All right. Well, starting off, we'll talk about these protests. I mean, these are the biggest protests that Belarus has ever seen, and they all started on election day. So 9th of August, 2020. So this is over a month ago. So these protests have been going on for a whole month. Um, what really kicked this off is because there's already been unrest going on before this. Is election day Alexander Lukashenko, the current ruler of Belarus, wins with about 80% of the vote. Everyone thinks this is insane. Even the people that support Lukashenko think that's way too many votes. He's got to be rigging this thing. And on the other side, you've got Miss Tsikhanouskaya, who's saying that she actually got 70% of the vote and she was cheated out of it. So from that, you have this huge explosion of public unrest. People fill the streets of Minsk, and Minsk, the capital of Belarus. Um, from what I've heard and seen, up to 200,000 people in Minsk, and that's sustained too. I mean, massive, massive protests. Hunter, you want to tell us more about them?
I mean, like, so far what we're seeing just a lot of is a lot of the figureheads, like main political, like protesters here, are just getting blackbagged by like Belarusian government. Wait, Belarus, and I don't know how.
Belarusian.
Yeah, Belarusian. But yeah, they're getting blackbagged here, just taken away off the streets, and we see like a lot of this happening between all different kinds of groups. Anybody who's standing up and saying, "Hey, I don't like that my president has been in power for 26 years," because he first
Yeah.
elected in what, like 1994 or something.
He was the first leader out of independence from the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
He's been there the whole time.
man's been in power almost like the same amount of time as Putin. Like it's like you see this authority, and
Yeah,
he's openly admitted multiple times, like, yeah, I believe that I'm slowly turning this country into an authoritarian, like slightly authoritarian, and I'm okay with that. But
yeah, it's
like
crazy.
a lot, like one big person that we've seen get detained lately is Maria Kolesnikova, and just
Yeah.
everything around this has just been real dicey because we saw that she was first gone missing 24 hours before she got like arrested.
Mhm.
Was arrested right on the border of it was like Slovakia or something, some other like Eastern European country. She was trying to supposedly trying to escape to, and then she was
Mhm.
forced out of her car right at the border, and then ripped up her passport right before she got taken back away. So it's like, was she trying to escape? Was she not trying to escape? Because whenever she first got detained, everybody in Belarus was saying like, no, no, she was trying to get out of here. That's why she tore it up to prove that she didn't want to be here anymore. And then it came out, I was like, no, she just really didn't want to leave at all. And
Yeah, it's a complicated situation for sure.
oh yeah,
I know it started with her being picked up off the streets of I believe it was she got picked up in Minsk.
mhm,
But what I heard is that, or what I had seen, and there is video of this, I do believe, that she was taken by masked men wearing black, wearing bulletproof vests as well. That seems to be a staple of the uh, masked police that they have around there, is that they'll wear bulletproof vests as well. But they took her, threw her in the car, and then they also had two other members of the council, the opposition council, in the car as well. So they were trying to take all three of them and get them out of there. Um, Now Kolesnikova, though, is in prison. So regardless of whether or not she tried to get across the border, she's currently in state prison. There's only, I believe, there's only one member of the opposition council, or one official member, that's left, that's not in jail right now, and not out of the country.
really?
Maybe you heard this story. Yeah, this was a recent story. I forget the name, but this one of the women on the opposition council, in her apartment in Minsk, she had people trying to break in several times. She'd received threats from the government, And so a bunch of European diplomats, Scandinavian, Lithuanian, etc., went to her house, went to her apartment, and they're camping out in her apartment to make sure that she doesn't get taken,
Ah, dude,
which is
doing that,
crazy.
that is insane. Like that's not actual living conditions. Like, that'd be awful. But
Hmm.
quick thing, just so
Yeah.
everybody else doesn't know, what exactly is this opposition council that these three people are on?
Yes, that's a good point. So the opposition council, the exact name I'm not sure of, but it is usually referred to as the
Yeah,
opposition council.
like that's how I
Um,
got it or heard it was referred to as everywhere. It was just the
okay,
opposition council.
okay, so I'm not butchering it then.
Yeah.
So it's led by Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and Ms. Tikhanovskaya is the wife of the previous opposition candidate to Lukashenko. Lukashenko imprisoned him. His wife Svetlana said, "You know what? I'm going to keep doing this. We're going to keep going. Even though my husband's in prison." Um, and so the opposition council is something that was sort of created slightly before, but I believe also um, during these protests. And it's a group of intellectuals, politicians, artists, intelligentsia of Belarusian society
Mhm.
that are all coming together to, I guess, get behind Miss Tikhanovskaya, but also, to sort of figure out how they're going to transition, from this authoritarian government, and it's clear to say that Belarus is authoritarian at this point.
Oh yeah, it's very easy to say that. Now, they're probably like, obviously their government's going to try and deny that because that's a big stigma to have. You don't want to be considered an authoritarian government. But I at this point now, with how much they've just been blackbacking people, and fighting and having the same president for 30 years, they're
Yeah.
authoritarian government. But
Hmm.
I think like another big thing that's been happening is like really like pertinent to how like the rest of the world, like the rest of like Europe is interpreting this is like you saw a lot of NATO is just blacklisting all of like the political members of the
Hmm.
current incumbent party in Belarus. I think they said like
Yeah.
Lukashenko and like all of his like cohorts and everybody else like no, you're not allowed to like leave. We're not going to host you anywhere else. Just done.
Yeah, well, that's a good step. That's a step in the right direction. It's something similar to what we saw with, um, but yeah, with NATO. I mean, Lukashenko's had his own problems. He's already accused NATO of, you know, collecting troops on the border in
Oh
an
yeah,
attempt to
they're
invade.
accusing Poland and everything, and then
Yeah,
was I think like the day after Poland was like, no, that's just not true at all.
no, sorry guys, that's wrong.
And like as much as I want to believe Poland could do that, I haven't like heard Poland doing any kind of aggressive like war stuff like that in quite a long time, especially not towards Belarus, a known ally of, well, supposed ally of Russia now. It would be a
Yeah,
pretty
I mean,
bold
at
move.
this point, yeah, I would say they're not, I guess, officially allies. Maybe they
Yeah.
are in some odd off pact somewhere, but Belarus and Russia definitely have very close ties. Um, and that's one of those, and that's another important aspect of it, of this whole situation is Russia's influence, and of
Oh yeah.
course, almost anything going on. How is Russia influencing it today? Ask that about anything. But in this case, it's actually quite interesting because although Belarus is right next to them, I mean, it's just west of Moscow. It's the first country that you get
Yeah.
to. Um, there's no little green men in Belarus so far. There's no volunteer soldiers appearing out of nowhere yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Because
there's been a few instances where, of possible mercenaries being found or journalists being sent over, but this is nothing like Crimea, and
very true.
Putin
Yes.
hasn't really intervened yet. I mean, he said, "Look, no one else intervened," but that's as far as he's gone,
Mhm.
which is surprising, because Putin's usually a little more gung ho. Something that's so close,
Oh yeah. That
but
like I think what they were saying is Lukashenko and Putin have an agreement where if they whenever they decide that the protests get out of hand, then they'll send in all of their like Russian police. But
Yeah,
supposedly they're trying to avoid that. But
yeah,
like,
and I think
go on.
yeah, well, because I'd seen this interesting point being made about why Putin's not doing anything. Is because the protests don't actually have any anti-Russian sentiment.
Yeah,
That they're mostly just we hate you, Lukashenko. You're a dick. Get out of here.
which I mean
Um,
totally fair. But
right.
I feel like though like Russia would want to have more involvement in that just because it is a border country and Russia tends to not like having a democratically elected people in their neighboring countries because it's a little too American for them.
Well, I think what Putin's hinging on this time, or at least for now, is perhaps that in Lukashenko's government or in Belarus, period, there's enough people that don't hate Russia but do hate Lukashenko,
Yeah.
so that even if he gets kicked out, whether by democratic means or otherwise, as long as Tsikhanouskaya doesn't win for him, it's probably fine because in his mind, I'm sure it's another Russian sympathizer is going to come up, and maybe they'll be less of a dick to the people of Belarus, but they'll probably still be just as closely connected to Russia.
And like I'm sure
You
with like
know,
how close Belarus is to Russia, they don't really have much of an option but to be like working for Putin. Because like if you are
right?
literally Russia's border from the rest of Europe, you don't you don't get to choose what side you're on. Like they're forced to be Russian allies.
Yeah, and I
And I
mean at this point, they basically are Russian. I mean,
yeah,
there's Belarusian culture. It used to be, Belarus was its own entity for a long time,
mhm,
or was even associated with, like, say, the Lithuanians or people from the Baltics. But now it's after the Second World War, especially, and during the time of Soviet rule, it's very, very much Russian.
yeah, and yeah,
Yeah,
we've hit our time mark. I think.
yeah.
Is there anything
I
else
think
you'd
yeah,
like
it's pretty good.
to throw in before we close this
Um,
one off?
I don't think so. I think this was a good run.
All right. Well, this has been week 2. It is September 12th, and see everybody next week.